Stardust, Chapter 25, Resolve. A series of break-ins at city morgues in central North Dakota are now considered part of a wider pattern after all bodies taken were confirmed retrieved from aircraft destroyed during battle with alien forces. Senator Goldman issued statement of condemnation for North Dakota governor after his resignation. "My only regret is that charges can't be levied against him. Too many brave young men and women lost their lives because of his poor decisions." 8:30 a.m. May 7, 2015, Stardust Labs. Twilight hummed to herself as she flipped another page in her book. It was the same one that Charles has given her all those weeks earlier, and with recent events, she found little time to actually sit down and read it.
Wands for magic?
She asked herself as the main character of the book found himself thrust into a world of magic he hadn't known existed.
I suppose that makes sense. If humans don't have horns to control magic, they'd need some sort of focus for spellcasting. But why unicorn hair?
Twilight gave her tail a speculative look before shrugging and turning back to the book.
My hair certainly isn't magical. Perhaps unicorns are different here.
Twilight continued to read through the book at a leisurely pace of 5 pages per minute, give or take a page while only taking breaks to check the tablet for the definition of a term or phrase that she didn't quite understand. When she tried to look up the names of cities and countries mentioned, the tablet still refused to display any information, though when she searched for Hogwarts she found a plethora of information. She had to quickly avert her eyes and fumble for the back button to avoid any dreaded spoilers for the story. The book itself was amazingly fun to read, and she found herself literally on the edge of her seat as the human boy found himself inside of a forest that sounded a bit too much like the Ever-Free Forest, in an attempt to locate and help, of all things, a wounded unicorn. Suspense turned to despair, and despair turned into horror as the unicorn's fate was revealed. Twilight had to restrain herself from recoiling from the book.
It's okay, Twilight. It's just a book. It's fiction. Right? Right?
She asked herself repeatedly as she tried to control her breathing.
But the book says that magic users keep themselves secret from the rest of the world, and the field's condition when I first came here did imply that there are magic users somewhere. They can't really think that drinking unicorn blood keeps people alive. Right?
The unicorn's mind reeled as another thought occurred to her.
It doesn't matter if it's true or not, only if they think that it is. They know nothing about magic, so who's to say if they have irrational beliefs like that? Before Star Swirl approached the mysteries of our world in a logical manner, we thought that just about everything was superstitious like that. Twilight, focus. The book. It's fiction. It's fiction. The front cover says so.
Twilight took a deep breath and let it out.
The author's just using this as some sort of thing for shock value. That's it. Something horrific to illustrate the monstrous nature of that thing.
Twilight's frayed nerves weren't helped when the door to her room shot open to reveal Dr. Valen.
Good morning, Twilight. Is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong,
Twilight replied as she settled back into her chair.
I just wish that there was a doorbell or chime or something. It's always a little abrupt when people show up. I enjoy visitors, but a little bit of warning would be nice, I think.
Moira looked at the door speculatively before giving a small shrug and turning back to Twilight.
I'll bring it up with Charles. I'm sure he could arrange something. Thank you. Oh, have you talked to him today? Has he gotten any work done with the teleporter mechanisms we ironed out yesterday?
Twilight asked eagerly.
I've been really curious about the kind of things that he could make ever since we first spoke. Have you seen anything he's made? I have not had a chance to speak with Charles yet, but I did forward our work to him to work with. As for the things that he's made, we're actually in one example of his work right now.
Moira gestured around the room before continuing.
This laboratory's default layout was based on a modular design originally created by Charles, and the configuration that you're in now was custom built to house you and the work relating to you. He's also assisted with weapons and armor designs, as well as helping produce practical applications for any alien technology we capture. Twilight's appreciation for Charles went up as Moira explained just how much the elderly engineer had created. That's impressive! Crafts ponies back home tend to focus on a single trade or profession, so being able to do well with so many things, that's really amazing. Can I go see where he works at some point? Perhaps, Moira answered with a moment's hesitation, before she produced a bundle of what appeared to be scrolls from under one arm. Would you be up for looking at some new pictures with me today? It's from something that our own scientists have had a hard time with. Oh, sure. Twilight nodded and she pushed away from her work desk and headed to her guest table. Before she looked at the now unfurled pictures and diagram, she mustered her courage and spoke up again. Moira, I've been meaning to ask something for a little while. I'm I'm really glad I was able to meet you and everyone else, and I've learned so much while I was here, but if it's not too much trouble, do you think that I might be able to start looking for my home?
Moira quirked an eyebrow and held Twilight's gaze for a moment before looking to the table.
We have started searching for your home system based on what information we have gathered thus far, and I'm afraid we haven't found any matches yet. Is there anything I can do to help? Not at this time, though if something does come up, we will ask you immediately. Fair enough. So, what are the pictures from? Do you know?
Moira laid out the first scroll and she took a seat at the table. She took a moment to collect her thoughts before she finally spoke.
The pictures are part of a device our soldiers encountered in the field. It moves on its own without an apparent pilot or controller nearby, and its movements were far too natural to be completely an automated device, at least as far as we understand them. There are several theories as to how it works, but given the degree of Illyrium circuitry in its wreckage, we were hoping you might be able to shed some light on things.
Twilight nodded eagerly as she looked down at the myriad of almost indecipherable pictures before her.
Well, it looks like the circuits are used to animate something, though the degree of circuitry is very thorough. I might even go so far to say that once it's activated, whatever this is could move around and make decisions all on its own. I remember in some history books where unicorns created similar things with Arcanite before the material was banned and destroyed. So, do you have any pictures or, videos of it? I'd love to see what it looks like in motion.
Moira's response was subtle, but Twilight noticed it. The fingers around her tablet tightened and her neutral expression became just a little bit strained.
I believe I can arrange that,
she said as she tapped several places on her tablet before placing it on the table in front of Twilight. A still image was displayed on the center of the tablet, and it appeared to be an almost picturesque scene of a nearly cloudless blue sky meeting green plains on the horizon. If not for the riot of strange symbols and seemingly random numbers and letters scattered all across the picture, it would have fit in as a landscape picture one might see in a doctor's office. Moira tapped the tablet's surface again, and Twilight was enraptured as the picture turned out to be a video. The picture tilted and turned like the view of a bird in flight, and the serene landscape was replaced by a large rectangular object that seemed hung in midair, while a pair of saucer shapes hovered nearby. Twilight was just about to ask about the lack of sound when a flash of green erupted from one of the saucer shapes, and Twilight gasped as the projectile connected with something moving, almost too fast to see, which exploded spectacularly. And as quickly as the explosion appeared, it was gone from the picture, and her eyes fell upon several humans running atop the top of a rectangle towards the edge of the tablet screen. On the other side of the screen was a new object that had settled on the surface of the rectangle, and a small ramp could be seen at the tail end of the object as several other tiny figures ran out from it.
That looks like...
Twilight racked her memories as her eyes fell upon the shape that the humans were running from, and she eventually remembered just where she had seen it before. The majority of the room was dark, though the lights illuminated most of the floor and some of the massive alcoves in the walls and along the floor. Several ominous metal shapes that looked like birds of prey lurked in the shadows, and Twilight found herself drifting towards the center of her group without even thinking of it. Twilight was so fixated on the little figures as they ran as she gasped again as a thick golden line jumped and cut across the front section of the object that the humans had just left. It spun out of control and disappeared from the screen, and Twilight's gaze fell upon what the screen was now centered on.
They look like fish,
Twilight found herself thinking as the three silvery objects turned and raced towards the right side of the screen, and she found herself leaning in to get a better view of the distant subjects, but any further observation was interrupted by a stuttering yellow line that spat from somewhere beneath the screen's viewpoint. The line connected with a leading silver fish as it fell to the ground in pieces. The two that remained turned to face the screen before Moira tapped the screen to stop the video.
We call them cyber discs,
Moira explained as she pointed at the two silver fish in the frozen image.
They appear to be fully automated and mechanical, though some of their mechanisms mimic the systems of organic life forms, so there is some debate as if it's actually a machine or some sort of new form of life that we've never encountered before. We're hoping that Illyrium circuits in his body might yield some insights as to how such a creature could exist. Well, from what I've seen, the circuitry appears to give it power to move about on its own, though I'd really like to see more of how it moves,
Twilight said before she gave a sheepish smile.
I'm afraid that this picture here is a little small, so I couldn't make out much. I'd like to see one up close if I could.
Moira's response to the seemingly innocent request gave the unicorn pause. The human looked at Twilight with a blank expression before she blinked and looked at her side.
There is one other video of the cyber discs at closer range, but the footage is not like this one. It's disturbing. But it's the only other footage we have of the discs in action. I would not blame you if you did not wish to see it. Disturbing? What does she mean by that?
Twilight thought to herself, but the train of thought quickly aborted itself.
They need my help, and I can survive watching something uncomfortable to help out.
She nodded and steeled herself before answering.
I want to see it. Very well,
Moira said before she tapped the tablet several more times before placing it back onto the table. One more tap and the video started. The video was mostly devoid of the seemingly random numbers and symbols the other video had, and it took Twilight a moment to realize the view was over the shoulders of one of the humans, possibly one of the tiny shapes that she had seen earlier. Before Twilight could study the image, the view swiveled over to a massive doorway that appeared to be blocked by a wall of blue light. Another human was beside the door and was attempting to step away when something emerged from the light. It was a flat disc with seams running along its flat top, and a glowing light that centered along the outer edge. And that light swept to the side to face the soldier barely a body length away before the disc itself began to spin and unfold. A segmented tail detached itself from the outer edge of the disc before the view fell behind a pillar. The disc reappeared on the screen as the view emerged from behind its hiding place, and Twilight got her first look at the cyber disc. Her early impression on its fish-like movement came back to her as she saw it dart through the air. The fin-like protrusions on either side of its thin body flared and folded as it jinked left and right, and its tail trailed behind like a nightmarish party streamer. A line of gold light shot out from the disc to somewhere beyond the screen's view, and from the briefest moment, the view turned to follow the beam. Another human was at the end of the beam, and Twilight's breath caught in her throat as she saw the unmistakable color of blood before the view jumped back to the disc. Its thin profile was now facing the screen, and Twilight had to squint as a flash of gold shot almost directly at the screen itself. Moira tapped the screen to pause the video before she finally spoke.
I'm afraid the video ends here. I hope it's enough to satisfy you. Any help that you can provide to unlock its secrets or develop a countermeasure would be extremely appreciated. I'll see what I can do,
Twilight replied as she continued to stare at the screen and the golden light that dominated the frozen video.